Way back in the early 1970s, Alix Kates Shulman, the novelist who wrote Memoirs of an Ex-Prom Queen, a novel that I read when I was a teenager and I found utterly enthralling and fascinating. I'm going to turn on. And her husband drew up this marriage contract where they divided the housework or tried to divide the housework in a completely equal manner. It was very, very detailed. And because it was so detailed, it almost invited ridicule. And it got it, as you can imagine. Arianna Huffington in her first book, The Female Woman, quoted from it and, made it seem kind of silly because of the way that it, detailed husband does this, wife does that. Each chore, outlined, here and there. Phyllis Schlafly did something similar in her first book, The Positive Woman, The Power of the Positive Woman. Okay. Now, well, something that like that does look kind of silly because of the detailing of it. I recognize that there really was a valid reason to do something like that. Okay, now what was the valid reason? Because without something like that, people would just automatically fall into dividing sex roles according to tradition. Okay, I'll give you an example. I was at my aunt's house. Again, this is way back in the old days, back in the 1970s, when I was a teenager. I think it was after Thanksgiving, and we had Thanksgiving dinner. Everybody was finished. Okay, now my aunt, my mother, my cousin's girlfriend, my other cousin's wife, all trooped into the kitchen to do the cleanup chores. My brother, my dad, my uncle, and my male cousins just sat around chatting. Okay, I didn't troop into the kitchen. Now, was I lazy? Was I making a feminist statement? Not quite on either count. You see, I was developing my mental illness of that age. And part of the reason I was developing the mental illness was because of confused sex roles. And the confused sex roles were generally transmitted to me by females. The idea of being in a kitchen with 4 other females was kind of alarming to me. That's why I stayed away from it. My mother got on to me afterwards about it. And no, I didn't make a feminist statement about the fact that my brother hadn't gotten in there. I told her that I was kind of upset. Okay, now, but the thing about that is I'm using this as an illustration of the fact that, and my mother was always complaining about what men were like. But she didn't tell the men, hey, come into the kitchen with us and divide the chores up. Despite all her griping and complaining, she automatically fell into doing the, quote, women's work, unquote. And so, that gives the Shulman's marriage contract at least a certain amount of reasonableness. Even if it was a little, even if it did invite a little bit of ridicule with its being so very detailed. Another thing about that was, though, when Phyllis Schlafly criticized it in The Power of the Positive Woman, she automatically jumped to she said, in a loveless marriage. Loveless? Why would she jump to the conclusion that the marriage was loveless just because they um, drew up house work a housework contract, or that hardly follows. And it also kind of reminds me of The Final Days by Woodward and Bernstein, where they publish as if it was a fact that they were certain of, that the marriage between Pat Nixon and Richard Nixon was loveless. They actually put down as if it was a fact that they knew that the Nixons had not been close since he lost his race for the governorship. About a decade before he won the presidency. How would they know? Phyllis Schlafly wasn't there when Alix Kates Shulman and her husband were alone. Woodward and Bernstein weren't there when Pat and Richard Nixon were alone. They're jumping to a conclusion that they can't possibly know, and writing it as if it was a fact that they knew that the marriage was loveless. As if they were, as if they were a fly on the wall when somebody else is alone with their husband or wife. They're not. And you could draw up that kind of contract and be very much in love and have a very hot sex life. And supposedly, I think they said that they claimed, and Woodward and Bernstein claimed that they got the information from something Pat Nixon supposedly told a doctor, but duh, things you tell a doctor are supposed to be confidential. Okay. But anyway, those are some thoughts I have. Um, and I just hope you enjoyed hearing them.